All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. This is Abby Kisa from Circle. We are thrilled you could join us tonight. There are 5 founding members of the Alliance participating tonight, and we had almost 200 people sign up to participate in this conversation. So even though not everyone's going to show up, organizers math right, so teachers are very familiar with that. Thanks for making it out, and we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar with all the folks who couldn't make it, and more who I'm sure will be interested in the future. So first, I wanted to share that just for those who just came on, my name is Abby. I work at Circle. We're using the webinar function today that allows us to chat throughout the conversation. So please feel free to throw a question or a comment or an experience that you've had into the chat and share it with everyone, including other resources that you find really valuable. In addition, throughout this webinar, as well as throughout 2016, our Alliance is using the hashtag #EducateToParticipate. So feel free to jump on Twitter and participate in that conversation as well. That hashtag and that feed is also somewhere where you can continue to throw resources throughout the course of the year. So chat function, Twitter. Just a quick reminder that our website, teachingfordemocracy.org, has a whole bunch of resources on it, and we'll continue to add resources to it throughout the year. Throughout this evening, throughout our 1-hour conversation today, we're going to hear from all 5 founding organizations of the Teaching for Democracy Alliance: the Close Up Foundation, iCivics, the League of Women Voters of the U.S., the National Council for Social Studies, and Circle. And we're also very much looking forward to hearing from all of you about your experience previously with teaching about elections and voting, what your resources you're looking for, and how our Alliance and upcoming new member organizations might really be able to help out in that way. So the first thing that I wanted to do is just give you a sense for what we're going to be chatting about tonight with the agenda. So first, we're going to start out with a conversation about why have an alliance. We're going to go into a snapshot of kind of the research basis for teaching about elections and voting. And then we're going to hear about key resources from each of the founding alliance organizations. And then we'll have some time for a discussion amongst ourselves, as well as Q&A if y'all have any questions you want to discuss and hear from other participants about, or hear from the civic ed organizations about. And just as a reminder, hashtag #EducateToParticipate on Twitter, and feel free to use the chat function in WebEx. Okay, so I was going to have Rachel talk about the Alliance, but it looks like we're still working on the audio there. I'm going to say a couple of sentences, and then maybe some of the other Alliance organizations can jump in. So just as a reminder, this is Abby, and I'm a staff member at Circle. Oh, great. Rachel, you are there. Okay, we just need to unmute her. Any chance, Emma, that you can do that? I'm, for some reason, having a problem pulling it up.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. I'm going to change your role to a presenter temporarily, if that's okay.
Yep.
Rachel, can you hear? Oh, that's not working. Okay. I think we're going to have to persevere, Rachel. For some reason, the audio is not working. But Rachel, please feel free to throw some comments in the chat, and then everyone else, including Scott from Close Up, can chime in. So one of the core parts of thinking about our work as an alliance is that we each bring unique strengths. And as we bring on more members, they will also have unique strengths. And so we are trying to be one place where teachers can go if they're thinking about teaching about elections and voting. Some of the organizations, specialize in using current and controversial issue discussions in the classroom. The League of Women Voters focuses on doing voter registration and helping teachers do voter registration in schools, while other organizations like iCivics focus on game-based learning and using some of those and learning some digital skills. So we all bring something unique to the equation, and that's one of the reasons why an alliance rather than, why not just separate organizations. Does anyone else from the founding organizations want to chime in about why you think an alliance is valuable around this?
This is Emma from iCivics, and I'll just add that the very presence of all these diverse individuals on this webinar really speaks to the power of an alliance. So we can activate all of our networks and really have a much stronger presence.
This is Susan from NCSS, and we're pleased because while we share a lot of the same constituencies, we also reach broader beyond the folks that we share. So I think this is a great opportunity to reach that common ground and also spread out and have other people pick up.
Indeed, the alliance organizations have considerable reach. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear from Rachel about this if we can get her audio working at some point, because COSUP has a real unique perspective on this.
Can you hear me, Andy?
Yes, great.
I would just briefly say that I think in addition to everything else that some of the founding members have said, the Alliance is really unique because it provides both teacher professional development ideas and ways to teach the vote and teach election and teach controversial issues in the classroom, but it also focuses on both inside and outside of classroom opportunities. So everything from being able to do gamification with iCivics in classroom or out of classroom to being able to watch a presidential debate or talk to different members of your city council or school board who are being elected, and then all the way to working on an English language arts connection with looking at historic women's right to vote cases and stories. So it really does, I think it has something for everybody, and it really, as an alliance, helps people to see that it's not just for civics class anymore. Voting is also for lots of other places in our school system, both inside and outside, and I think that's one thing that's really special about the Alliance is that it's beyond the four walls of the civic classroom.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So, Christine, thank you so much for already putting a question in. We're going to get to the questions later on, so please, everyone, keep putting in questions or comments, respond to questions as you feel like you can. So, with that, with talking about why an alliance, I wanted to provide a little bit of background on the research. What does research say about all of this? Why teach about elections and voting? And so just to start, why voting? Well, there's several different data-driven reasons why. And voting isn't the only way, as we all know, that young people can participate in democracy, participate in their communities. But the activities surrounding elections, not just voting, but voting and the discussions about issues, talking to family, friends, neighbors about what's going on in your community is a core way to participate in democracy and a core way to have a voice in what's happening where you live. And young people's voices are important. Young people bring unique perspectives to particular issues. So we need to get young people ready so that when they are eligible to vote, they can cast a ballot. And that's one thing that research has consistently shown, which is the earlier you start to vote, the more likely it is that you'll be a habitual and a lifelong voter. And finally, there's the potential that learning about elections and learning about voting, becoming a voter, can be a gateway to other types of engagement. So specifically when we talk about classrooms, we see a lot of different reasons why this can be so important. So as I mentioned, Circle's a research organization. We do research on young people's civic education and civic engagement. And Nuria later is going to talk a little bit more about what we do. In 2012, we did a national survey of civics and government teachers. And one of the things that we heard in that was that 85% of those teachers, a nationally representative sample of civics and government teachers, 85% of the teachers who we spoke with agreed or strongly agreed that students like to discuss elections. And my colleague Felicia Sullivan, who's on the webinar as well, is one of the people who participated in a real big analysis of this. And Felicia can provide the link in the chat box to the study. But it was really valuable in understanding that there is an opportunity to teach about elections and voting, and that teachers are taking advantage of that, and students are enjoying it. And in fact, this research also showed us that 18 to 24-year-olds who recall being taught about elections and voting in high school were actually more likely to cast a ballot that year in 2012. So teaching about elections and voting has a concrete impact when done well. But we also see that there can be more support for this. One of the things that we asked teachers in this study was the perceptions of support that teachers see from the district level, from the surrounding community, from parents in teaching about elections. And while 90% of teachers believe that their principal would support, teaching about elections, only 38% of teachers, again, civics and government teachers, feel that they would get strong support from their district, and only 28% think that they would get strong support from parents. And what's interesting is that the data shows that teachers in this study, again, a national study of civics and government teachers, said that when teachers perceived strong support, those teachers were significantly more likely to provide a classroom climate for discussion, as well as deliberative forms of discussion. And we know that some of those deliberation skills are transferable to a lot of different environments. And so finally, with respect to research, I wanted to share that, there is some sort of worry, and that's what people might be seeing in this sort of levels of support, that elections and voting, talking about elections and voting in the classroom, that, it's tricky. And it is tricky, and it needs to be done carefully and in a high-quality way, but it can be done in a balanced way. And our 2012 analysis that we did indicated that taking a civics class actually did not correlate with a particular partisanship or a particular youth vote choice when we heard from young people. And so we'll highlight more high-quality resources that teachers and schools can use today in order to get to that place where we have young people and teachers talking about amazing, amazing things in addition to what you're already doing. So that's a little bit of background, a slice of the research that there is about young people and voting and young people and elections. All of that information is on at teachingfordemocracy.org. So now we're going to jump into the kind of snapshots from each organization. Like I said, there's 5 Teaching for Democracy Alliance founding organizations, and each organization has some key resources that we want to share with you. And to start, we're going to hear from my colleague, Nuria Hayat, about Circle.
Hi, my name's Nuria. I'm a colleague of Abby's and a researcher at Circle. So Circle, as you can see, is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. It's a nonpartisan, independent academic research center that specifically studies young people in politics, especially those who are marginalized or disadvantaged in political life. So Circle is part of the Jonathan Tisch College of Citizenship and Public Service at Tufts. And we're a research clearinghouse of sorts that provides detailed data on youth political and civic life in all 50 states across the U.S. Our research areas include K-12 civic education, youth voting, and political participation, including youth attitudes, youth beliefs, as well as research on concepts of citizenship, civic knowledge, and community participation. If you go to our website, you'll be able to see all our research products, which include, among other things, identifying evidence-based practices for developing and enhancing community participation, civic knowledge, and learning in K-12 education system to support teachers, schools, and districts. So we're uniquely positioned at the intersection of research and practice in youth voting and civic education to support this alliance and help the mission of teaching for democracy. As you can see, Felicia, my colleague, has posted the link in the chat section. So all of our research is free and online, and you can find it at civicyouth.org.
Thanks so much, Nuria. Next, we're going to hear from Scott Wilson from the Close Up Foundation. Scott?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Thanks, Abby. Sorry about that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have from Close Up that are specifically related to elections and voting. Our classroom resources tend to call on students to debate or to deliberate in an effort to build those skills and those habits that are necessary for democracy, and these things that we'll look at all relate to issues in the election. Thanks, Emma. So we have several resources. One is a unit plan on teaching the vote, so talking about the value and importance of voting. That lesson plan is a little bit less predicated on teaching with controversial issues and is more oriented to understanding the voting. But the next, the 2 unit plans on women's rights in voting and youth voting, the 2 that are listed at the bottom, are set up in a way to get students to discuss access to the ballot. The women's rights lesson plan focuses on the history of the women's suffrage movement and the movement for the access to the ballot. Youth voting is a lesson plan based on the controversy surrounding moving to having younger and younger citizens being allowed to vote. So in some jurisdictions, they've lowered the voting age to 16. And so this is a way to have students be introduced to that idea, to talk about the pros and the cons of it, and to think about how a move like that might impact their lifelong voting habits. And finally, the last 2 resources I wanted to draw attention to, these are current issues updates, so these aren't activities so much as information that students can read, and then they're written in such a way that they foster debate and deliberation. One is about the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court case last year that struck down certain key provisions of the Voting Rights Act, and a look at legislative efforts to overturn, or not to overturn, but to reinstate portions of the act that were stricken down by the Supreme Court. And then the final issue is about campaign finance reform, and it's a way to draw attention not just to the election, but to issues about how we conduct elections and campaigns in the United States. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott. So next we're going to hear from our friends at iCivics.
Hey, this is Emma from iCivics. We are an educational nonprofit founded by retired Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, and we provide a digital games-based curriculum to help students learn about civics. So I just want to highlight a few things. First of all, in terms of our offering, kind of the whole iCivics package, We have curriculum units, we have lesson plans, we have games. We are very much known for our games. And then we have some tools. We have Drafting Board, which takes students through the process of writing an essay, a 5-paragraph essay. We have DB Quest, so document-based quest. That's kind of a concept tool, and we're looking to build that out a bit more in the future, but it's pretty neat, so check it out. And then, of course, we have our web quest. So this is sort of the totality of the iCivics offering. I want to take a moment to highlight our new and improved and very exciting Win the White House game, just in time for the primary season. So the URL you'll see there, and I linked to it in a couple of other places, that will take you to our landing page for Win the White House. You can always go to iCivics.org and navigate around, but if you want to go straight to our Win the White House resource, and we hope you will, there's the URL. And from here you can watch the video about the game, a trailer if you will, go straight to the game itself or to our teaching page on that game. And so I just want to highlight with a couple of screenshots what's going on with the game. If you've ever played Win the White House before, we've had this game for some time. Like I said, this is the new and improved version of it. A lot of features of it will seem familiar, but it'll just be a little bit more exciting. And one reason for that is there are a lot more options for the user to personalize the experience. So everything from selecting your candidate's avatar, your candidate's name, your slogan, your party, what issues you want to address. There's even an option now to be a maverick on a certain issue, so to go against your party on a particular issue of your choosing. So just a lot of new ways to make the game more engaging and more impactful for the user. And the main point of it is to get to the White House. So from the primary process to the convention to garnering all the electoral votes to get you to that magic number and to win the White House. So it's a really neat game. I urge you to check it out. If you're in the classroom and you can find the time, carve out the time, and you have the resources for your students to play it, I just can't recommend it enough. It's really a lot of fun. Beyond Win the White House and all of its magic and glory, we have a lot of elections resources, and those are can all be found at iCivics.org/election_resources_2016. That URL you see at the bottom of this slide. We're constantly updating that. We're constantly adding new resources. We just threw up a political debate guide and a candidate report card. I say threw up there. We just put it up, but of course a lot of thought and effort were put into developing those tools, and we'll pretty soon have a ballot builder up there for you as well. So check it out. And as always, holler at us. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and if you want to ask me any questions, I will respond to you personally. It's emma.humphreys@iCivics.org.
I hear that there is a friendly competition and the Close-Up Foundation offices are on Win the White House. So it sounds like it's a fun game, even for people who are not in school. So next we're going to hear from Maggie Bush from the League of Women Voters of the United States.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. As Abby said, I'm with the League of Women Voters. I'm our Senior Elections Manager, and I work with our volunteer affiliates all over the country to encourage voter registration. Hopefully people have heard of the League. We've been around since the women's suffrage movement, actually, and are active in about 800 communities in all 50 states. So primarily what we have to offer is for teachers who are working with high school seniors who are actually eligible or about to be eligible to register to vote. And our hope is that we can help you actually provide concrete support for students who are looking to register to vote this year. We have a high school voter registration program for the last 6 years or so. Through that program, we've been active in registering a minimum of 30,000 high school students to vote for the first time. We think the numbers are probably much, much higher than that. Right now, we're in 200 schools. We may be in some of your schools helping. I hope that that's the case. If not, we'd love to connect you so that you can invite some of our experienced volunteers in to help your students get registered to vote. In particular, we like to focus on students who are least likely to have been asked to register to vote, least likely to have gotten the information they need from other sources, or are least likely to get that on a college campus next year. So we're focusing particularly in schools that serve likely non-college youth, communities of color, low-income communities, but certainly we will come to any and all communities to help folks get registered. If we can go to the next slide, we have a training manual that has been tested in hundreds of schools that's written not only for community groups like our own affiliates with the League, but also for you as teachers and other advocates to talk about how to develop a voter registration drive in your school. This is based on the feedback we've received from partners and our own volunteers and teachers about how this can really work best and be efficient, but also have a high level of registration. So getting the biggest bang for our buck when we set up a registration drive inside of a high school. So I certainly encourage you to look at that. Other things that the League can offer you in your local community, again, we can certainly, if you go to the link at the bottom of this slide, and we'll put it in the chat as well, it's very likely that our volunteers would be happy to come to your school. They know voter registration and who's on the ballot and what the rules are for voting in your state in and out. So no need for you to figure that all out on your own. I certainly hope you might reach out to your local league to get that information. We also have a national website that has all of that information, including detailed ballot information later in the year and right now for the primaries, called vote411.org. That has served hundreds of thousands of voters already this year. We expect millions more to come to us for that kind of information, so we'll make sure to share that in the chat. It's also likely that at the local level we might have free materials you could hand out in your schools, volunteer opportunities for your students if they're interested in getting out and registering voters beyond your school in your community, and lots of other nonpartisan resources. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Maggie. Just a reminder to everyone, please don't hesitate to put comments, questions, experiences in the chat box, and remember that we're on Twitter at all times at #EducateToParticipate, #EducateToParticipate. So next we're going to hear from Susan Griffin of the National Council for the Social Studies.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just really pleased to have an opportunity to be with these other fine organizations and see the way that we can provide some wonderful synergy to encourage young people to learn about the 2016 elections and also to participate as much as they possibly could, either by volunteering or voting for the first time. So NCSS is all about helping teachers prepare students for college, career, and civic life. So we are pleased to have a wonderful journal, Social Education, and we have a teacher's library that has a lot of resources about the electoral process and theoretical content as well, and very practical lesson plans that you can use, in the classroom the next day. So we have that kind of variety. In this particular, the January-February issue, there's 3 absolutely wonderful articles about the election. The Keys to the White House, which is a review of looking at different attributes that will tell you who's going to win the election based on a variety of markers. That's really wonderful. The Socialism in the United States reminds teachers to remind students that this is not the first candidate that our friend Bernie is not the first candidate who identified as a socialist. And then I think my favorite is Teaching in the Time of Trump. All of these articles, by the way, are available in open access. So you just go to socialstudies.org and find our publications and go to this wonderful picture of the White House, and you will have open access to these articles. Teaching in the Time of Trump is a wonderful guide for helping your students ask the right questions about Trump, but also the other candidates, so that if they happen to be able to see one of the debates, and they'll note a variety of things that each of the candidates say, but in particular Trump, because he's been known to be shot down if people have bothered to go to fact check. Fact check is one of my favorite resources for students and voters in general. So teaching in the time of Trump, and we will continue to have other articles throughout the election process, as well as possible some other webinars. And I love this idea that we're all going to continue to put resources on our joint website. I think that's terrific. National Council for Social Studies endorsed a documentary called Electoral Dysfunction, and this resource comes with a teacher guide, and the film is downloadable, but you can also get a copy of it sent to you for free, and the teaching resources are for free as well. It's a terrific and very engaging, I think, film that goes through the origins and present-day impact of the Electoral College, one of the most confusing things about our election system, how varied our voter ID laws are, and how varied the ballot designs are, and how that can impact participation. So I encourage all of you to take a look at Electoral Dysfunction and share it with your students as well. So we are planning to participate in this absolutely wonderful civic experience throughout the rest of the year, and we will have more to come. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Susan. So our colleagues have been throwing a whole bunch of links up in the chat box for all of these resources that have been discussed. All of these resources are also linked to from the teachingdemocracy.org website, including things like the ways to find your local League of Women Voters, like the social education article, including the NCSS Teachers Library, and more. And like Susan said, we'll be continuing to update that as we develop and learn about new resources. So now we're going to transfer to some brainstorming amongst ourselves and some discussion. So one of the things that we would really like to hear from participants, from y'all about, is what do you think that an alliance like ours should be doing? We have some priorities, we have some plans, but we really would like to know more about what you feel like is absolutely needed by teachers like yourself. So feel free to throw stuff up onto Twitter or in our chat box so we can hear from other teachers about that. While people are thinking about that and thinking about the resources and maybe what else you might be looking for, I wanted to share some of the information that we heard in the registration process. We asked a couple of questions, and you can see on that chart with the stars that one of the things that we heard from folks was that teachers are really looking for activities that engage students, and that's the highest priority when it comes to elections and voting. One of the other things that we are hearing from teachers, from the folks who registered for this, was that people are looking for activities that might not take too long because teachers might not have a lot of time to fit this content in. So I wanted to throw that question to our leaders from the Alliance and to everyone else in the chat box and on Twitter. I mean, what is some examples of activities that might not take that long, but would be meaningful to students to talk about or think about elections and voting? What might someone throw out there as a response to that kind of a question?
Abby, this is Maggie from the League. I can jump in and say one exercise that I'm embarrassed to say I'm not even sure where I first saw it done, but now we encourage all of our volunteers to do this in classrooms, is a simple, what we call a stand-up, sit-down activity. This is the bare bones. If you have a minute and a half to talk about voting and the importance of every individual's vote. And the specifics of it are in the training manuals that Emma and others have been sharing in the chat box, and it's on the website. But you can simply ask every student to stand up, and then ask about half of them to sit down, and those folks sitting down represent the roughly 50% or so of young people who were not registered to vote and did not vote in the last presidential election, and then ask another handful to sit down, and those folks represent the young people who were registered but for whatever reason could not make it to the polls and actually cast their vote during the election. And I know that our volunteers and teachers have done this exercise and varieties on it in lots and lots of schools, and that it tends to show a real visual picture to the students about just who is making the decisions for the rest of them if folks are not registered to vote. So that's a simple visual, no props needed, no technology needed if that's a hurdle in a classroom. And I'm sure my colleagues have even more exciting ideas.
This is Rachel from Close Up, and I would say that there's a very short activity in the back of the Teach to Vote lesson plan that students can do either in class or outside of class, talking with people in their classroom or in their school or in their community if they take it home for about 10 or 15 minutes worth of discussion on why people vote, why people don't vote, what they choose to vote on. And it's done in the form of a really quick 5 to 10 minute interview. So again, they could do that with their peers, or they could do that not even in class, but do it out of class and then bring back the results and tally the results up on the board so that you could get an idea about sort of the civic pulse of your community. So it does not take too much class time at all. So I think that's great. And I did want to respond to saying also that I think a lot of the things on the Alliance website, if you're looking at iCivics, Win the White House, or even reading one of the close-ups, the voting rights, reading that information or reading the campaign finance information can easily be done in less than a class period. So if you don't have a full class period, many of the activities we have, you can break them up into multiple class periods over the course of a week.
Okay, well, thanks so much for addressing that. There's, one of the questions that has come up already today from Kimberly, and we know that some people are really wrestling with this, which is, what have you told teachers yourself, or other teachers, if you are a teacher, what have you told for people who feel like they're not getting support? They're not getting support because there are members of the community or, folks in leadership who feel like teaching about elections and voting is bound to be indoctrination or bound not to be balanced in some way. So what advice do you have you given people before, members of the Alliance, and folks who are on chat? Please feel free to put up resources on chat or Twitter. But what do you all feel like is helpful in a situation like that?
So this is Emma from iCivics, and I'm going to chime in with my personal experience when I was a first-year teacher. I grew up and went to school in the bluest of blue counties in Florida, and I taught in one of our reddest counties, and I was a government teacher, and I very much believed in teaching controversial issues. So I found it was helpful to get out ahead of this, to kind of beat the community, beat the parents to their concerns, sent a letter home. It was something I had approved by administration before I did so, just making really clear what my philosophy was, why I wanted to talk about these political issues, what my motivations were in talking about. I think my exact line was, my only agenda is to help educate your child and to help instill in them a disposition toward engagement. This has nothing to do with personal opinions, with ideologies, et cetera. And I tended to get a lot of support responses back from parents saying, I'm so glad you're talking about this in the classroom. Here, can't wait to talk to my child about this when they get home. But having a letter, and I think, Abby, we've worked on a letter. Do we have that on our site yet, or is that coming soon?
It's coming soon, yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Emma?
Yeah, so Carrie Rahill, our Director of Content at iCivics, she's also an experienced classroom teacher, and she pulled from some other organizations, kind of pulled together a bunch of different individuals to review a sample letter or a template letter, if you will, kind of communicating what I was just talking about, why it's important to teach about elections, to teach about politics, and what the purpose is for doing so. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are shaking your head saying, you don't understand my community, and that's fair. I realize that it's really tough out there, and there's some communities where this is really charged, and you're in a tough spot. So I don't want to sound insensitive to that. I think getting administrative support is huge, and then, of course, communicating with stakeholders. Hopefully that mostly means parents, but you might have to go beyond that.
And Emma, this is Rachel from Close Up. I just posted in the chat box, this is on both our website and on the Alliance website as well, on teaching the vote. The lesson plan is at the back, but the first 4 pages of this document could really be helpful, Kimberly, in addition to the cover letter that we're working on to have parents be able to read. This first 4 pages works you through all the research, all the data from Circle on why it's important to do this and how to help your community be more accepting of it. We know it's a really tough sell, particularly with how polarized our country is right now. So there are some great tips on everything from first letting everyone know before you start what you're doing, why you're doing it, and to echo what Emma said, that you're doing this to invest in their students' political efficacy and engagement over a lifetime, because we know that starts at school. And then also to give some nods to bringing in different members of the community from all sides of the political debate. So the suggestion to have everybody come talk to your class, all the candidates from all the parties, no matter what their affiliation, to sort of allay any fears that you're indoctrinating, and also some tips on how to talk to other teachers, principals in your building, and parents. So I'd encourage you to come back and check the Alliance website for that letter home to parents, and then also take a look at some of what we have in Teach the Vote from across all of our organizations.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Want to come in?
My youngest daughter wants to get her house painted.
Oh, well, Jose would be, I'm sure, more than willing to get his number.
So thanks, everyone. One of the other things that I wanted to chime in about was that we are absolutely interested in hearing from you about what you think the Alliance can do to be supportive beyond this letter, potentially, of being supportive of teachers. And so please let us know. Please, you can respond to the email that I sent you, or, put something in the chat box, or hit us up on Twitter using the Educate to Participate hashtag at any time. So moving forward, a couple of other questions. One of the things that came up earlier was from a special education teacher who's on the line with us tonight and wanted to know about differential teaching to students at different levels. So are there various ways to modify the resources that people have talked about for students who are at different places? Or is this a gap that we need to fill as an Alliance?
I think this may be a gap that we do need to fill as an Alliance. I would say I'd like to know a little bit more in the chat box. Are you talking about special, like what range of special education students, dyslexia or autism, or just it would be great to know more about that so we could know how to better serve that group.
Yeah, I will add, there are some digital resources that already have this built in. With iCivics, we're not quite to that level yet. We do offer games across different grade levels, so elementary, middle, and high school. But I'm sure some of you have heard of this great new application called Newsella that allows you to adjust the reading level of daily news. I cannot claim to have used this in the classroom, but one of our educator networks, Jim Brantley from California, he's a master teacher, and he just sings the praises of this application. Again, it's called Newsella, and I'll throw up the link here in just a sec.
Thanks, Emma. And Christine, feel free to chime in with what specifically you might be thinking about so that we can respond more specifically. And one of the things to be aware of that New Zealand is doing this year is having an initiative in 2016 where a mock election. And so that's something that if you're already using New Zealand, you can check out that kind of aspect of it. So instead of, kind of news broadly, it's news about elections. So another question that came up, I think that I made a word cloud about what people thought that they were looking for out of, kind of this conversation and future conversations. And one of the things that was interesting to me was that we have ELA teachers, so English Language Arts teachers, who are interested in using election content and voting related content in their classes. So I'm wondering if folks have comments about that. I know that iCivics has a very specific resource around ELA. So do any of the founding Alliance members want to talk about ELA-related resources?
The close-up resources that are up on the site are matched to Common Core English Language Arts standards, and particularly the Women's Rights Lesson Plan and the Youth Vote Lesson Plan we've had English and Language Arts teachers use in their classroom. There's a lot of reading in both of those lesson plans that would fit really nicely within the Common Core English Language Arts standards.
Thanks, Rachel.
This is Emma from iCivics. I want to mention that those two resources, they're not games. We refer to them as classroom tools. The first one is that drafting board, which I mentioned earlier, helping to construct a 5-paragraph essay and doing so with a lot of scaffolding. And the scaffolding, of course, is slowly pulled away, right, as the student works through their essay. And then DB Quest, which brings students through a document-based question, again, with that scaffolding in place. I'll add, this will sound like a Florida-specific resource, but I think it's useful to folks all over the country teaching civics. The Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, and I or one of my colleagues will throw up that link in just a second. The Florida Joint Center for Citizenship, it's out of Orlando, Florida. They have a whole curriculum based around elementary level English language arts, social studies content. So in Florida, we have a law that requires elementary school teachers to use social studies content when teaching ELA standards. And so the Florida Joint Center responded to that legislation by creating this curriculum. And I suspect that it's something that could be used in upper grades, especially with struggling readers.
This is Scott with Close Up. Another aspect of the English language arts, for any state that has adopted Common Core, as part of the, as they're defining standards for English language arts, deliberation and public speaking are a major part of, there's speaking and listening standards. And so any of the resources that the Alliance provides that draw students into discussion, giving presentations, joining in deliberations or whole group debates, even the stand-up, sit-down activity that was mentioned earlier, who asks students to speak as to why they stood up or remain seated. You're practicing that whole portion of the speaking and listening standards that are part of the Common Core. We tend to think of reading and writing as the baseline or what you need to do for ELA, but it includes a host of other verbal things as well.
Thanks so much, Scott. Okay. So we have a really interesting example here that our teacher friend Mike put up in the chat box about using delegate counts to track the primaries, not taking sides, reposting what you've seen in the news that day concerning the elections, and he's received positive response from parents about what the students have been discussing in classes. It's a fantastic story, Mike. Thanks so much for sharing it. So our colleagues have been throwing lots more links into the chat here about iCivics Drafting Board, iCivics DB Quest, and then the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship ELA resources. Thanks so much, everyone, for doing that. Please, if anyone has any last questions, put them up in the chat box because we're almost going to start to wrap up. One of the things that we're really interested from hearing folks about is what other type of professional development would you like to see earlier on in 2016 so that you can use those skills later during the, maybe prepare for during the summer or use during the fall. We're in primary season right now. The conventions are going to come up soon for the parties. So there's a lot of opportunities to use different skills in the classroom and use different resources. So definitely let us know if you feel like there's something very particular that you'd be interested in hearing from groups about. So feel free to put ideas in the chat box or on Twitter. And I am going to turn it over to Emma to wrap things up.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. So we just want to say that we're not going anywhere. We're going to be around, and we're going to try to have a really strong presence this presidential election season all throughout 2016. We have a lot of ideas, but it's really important that we're an alliance that serves our community. So please communicate with us. So whereas this webinar was very broad-based, kind of giving a lay of the land, introducing you to all of the partners and all of our critical resources, we plan to have additional webinars where we really dive into particular topics such as classroom or school-based voter registration, controversial issues discussion, having an entire webinar around building support, stakeholder buy-in, having resources we can share at that point, and then, like I mentioned, other topics you suggest. So please be in touch with us, let us know, and we'll serve you as best as we can. Most importantly, just keeping the energy going. It is so important. For those of you who are on social media, particularly on Twitter, you know the power of a strong social media campaign and a lot of energy around a hashtag. This is how we get energy and excitement around the work we do and continue to stress, not just to our own community, but to the community at large, that educating about elections and voting is really important. So please continue to tweet your stories, your pictures, your videos. All of that content is really helpful, and we will highlight it and showcase it as much as we can.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight, and pay attention to the teachingfordemocracy.org website for all new updates about the Alliance, and we'll try to address all the questions that you have in the future there. So look out for more webinar information. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.